The New York Jets are an absolute disaster, but the bad news for Jets fans is the worst part of the organization isn't going anywhere. That and more on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready. Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome into the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. Make sure to tune into every episode of Locked On NFL on Amazon Music. I am your host, Tyler Rowland, the Madman, joined today, as I am every Wednesday, by the brain, Locked On NFL expert Luke Braun. On today's episode, we're going to decide who we trust more to knock off the favorite in their conference. NFC, AFC, a lot to discuss, but we will start with the New York Jets firing their general manager, Joe Douglas, in an absolute crash-out move from a franchise that is probably the most disappointing of the year. Before we get into it, thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Luke, the Jets can make all of the moves they want, but Woody Johnson, still their controlling owner, and things aren't going to get any better as long as that's the case.
No, it's Aaron Rodgers is the controlling owner of the New York Jets. But you're right. Like until he's gone, there's no getting rid of it. Woody Johnson might go though. I mean, he might rejoin presidential administration. So.
Absolutely, he very well may. But with that being said, let's throw it to my guy John Butchko. Has been through so much.
Oh my goodness, John!
Locked On Jets, breaking down this news.
Yet another surprising move in a turbulent season for the New York Jets. Now the general manager's out. I'm John, the host of Locked On Jets, and the Jets have fired general manager Joe Douglas after 5.5 seasons. This team is in the middle of a disastrous season. None of their major moves have worked out. The Aaron Rodgers trade has been a catastrophe. Firing Robert Saleh did not fix this team. Neither did trading for Devontae Adams or signing Hassan Reddick. And it's the general manager who pays the price. Now, many of the major moves from this team have been dictated by ownership, not the general manager. But Douglas's record over 5.5 seasons is 30-64. He simply was not good enough. For more on the Jets, we'll talk plenty more about the firing of Joe Douglas and other topics around the team. Tune into the Locked On Jets podcast every Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, listen. I got to do this. Luke, I know where you're going. I know. I don't think that Joe Douglas is a terrible general manager. I think the Jets are absolutely cursed, and that if and when Joe Douglas gets another opportunity to be a general manager, I think he'll do fine. I think you look at some of the picks he's made, Sauce Gardner and Garrett Wilson, Elijah Vera Tucker. I think Quinnen Williams. He brought in C.J. Mosley. You obviously got DJ Reed. Michael Carter as a slot corner. Like, I think that the Jets have done some decent things. I know there are some terrible picks in there as well. Zach Wilson is ultimately, I think, his worst move. The Hassan Reddick situation, absolute disaster, which had this season off on the wrong foot to start. But I don't know that if it was Joe Douglas's decision to go get Aaron Rodgers, I'm not certain that I'm confident that he would have done that if he wasn't being told to do so. I know I tend to make excuses for people when I feel like there's owner interference here, but I just don't think that Joe Douglas is as bad as he's being represented by this firing in his time in New York.
I mean, you don't get 3 cracks at a quarterback. That's really the reality here. You mess up the Zach Wilson thing. You know, you come in your first, okay, cool. A quarterback didn't work out. That happens. But I don't think, like, a lot of GMs don't get a second one, and you sure as heck don't get a third one. That's just how that is going to be in the NFL, the way that GMs are. This is not the 90s where GMs and you know, player personnel people would have the job for 15 years, whether they were good or not. It's just how it goes. But I think the real mistake, it wasn't necessarily, I mean, I don't think it was super unreasonable to think that Aaron Rodgers coming off of like back-to-back MVPs wasn't going to still have something in the tank, right? Like that isn't, I don't think, true. It's also, I don't think Aaron Rodgers on the field is the worst part of that Jets offense by any stretch of the imagination. But the problem was there wasn't a vision for what this building and culture was supposed to be like. This was a culture failure. And a lot of that is Aaron Rodgers, Grima worm tonguing his way into, this like disastrous thing, bringing in Nathaniel Hackett, just one more Aaron Rodgers friend, right? And sort of hinging the entire organization on the whims of the quarterback rather than having a vision for what you want to build and building it is the kind of thing that happens when you fire a guy a year too late and he's trying to save his job. Because the vision they wanted to build was around Zach Wilson, and that didn't work. So then you just kind of let him lame duck your way into bigger quagmires, and now where do the Jets go from here? I don't know. It gets a lot worse before it gets better.
I mean, you have to wonder at some point how comfortable certain people will be with taking that job. I think we're seeing coordinators get paid more in the NFL, and think like a guy like Ben Johnson, he turned down job opportunities last year because he's like, I'm just going to stay in Detroit, get a little bit of a pay raise, and wait for a better opportunity. I think you're in this situation with the Jets where you're probably only going to get lower end candidates in the hiring cycle because the highest candidates, the best candidates, just aren't simply going to want to deal with the nonsense. And that's a situation the Jets have put them in. And that only creates more problems because you're not hiring the best talent. So I don't really know where they go from here to fix this. They're kind of in a terrible spot. And with the owner, like you said, maybe going off and out of the picture, I think that makes it even more dangerous to take this job.
The people I feel for with it is Jets fans. My father-in-law is a diehard Jets fan, has been his whole life. And, he'll complain to me about things that happened in the 80s. And it's like so hard to ask a Jets fan, oh, well, now you got to be a little patient. Now you got to wait for a rebuild. Like, well, we got to wait for another one? We got to do another one? Right. The Jets have absolutely done their fans a disservice, and I wouldn't blame any Jets fan for taking a step back and maybe not renewing their season tickets for a year or two while the Jets try to figure out which end is their ass and which end is their elbow.
Yeah, it's going to be tough for them to do that now, especially they're probably going to have to get rid of Aaron Rodgers. And then, are they going to be in a position to get a quarterback? I wouldn't say this is the best quarterback draft. So a lot of questions coming down the pipe for the
You have
New
to survive
York
the cap thing. You have to figure out what you're going to do at QB. And by the way, and your owner might not be present for any of that, and then might come back from another ambassadorship in London and then like be mad about the state of affairs and go ruin everything again, by the way, which seems to be kind of what happened. But it also like that seems to be what happened with Robert Saleh. Like it felt like Robert Saleh was coming in and was going to build the Jets into something real and dedicated. We all need to learn this lesson from the Lions. The Lions were bad for 50 years until they decided to build something real and dedicated and committed to a vision of what the team was supposed to be. This Dan Campbell, this grit thing, like the thing that the Lions are doing. And the second you deviate from that path, you start second guessing, you get too many cooks in the kitchen, you get clashing personalities, you get clashing styles, and it will not work. You need to fully commit to what you are doing. And if you fully commit and it doesn't work, then so be it. Everyone's getting fired anyways, but chase two rabbits, you lose them both.
I love that. I also always say you walk down two paths, you walk down the wrong one. So patience will be required. And that's something that the Jets ownership hasn't really shown that they're capable of. So feel bad for Jets fans, but maybe this is a step towards doing it the right way going forward. But with that being said, there's a clear favorite in each conference. Who do we count on to take them down? It's Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the most fun and the most simple way to play daily fantasy sports. It's the best place to get real money sports action. That's why they have over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. PrizePicks makes daily fantasy sports accessible to all because all you have to do is pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Again, you just say more or less on 2 to 6 players. Think Jamar Chase, 79.5 receiving yards. Patrick Mahomes, 1.5 passing touchdowns. Travis Kelce, 59.5 receiving yards. Saquon Barkley, 79.5 rushing yards. You just pick more or less. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. It's Prize Picks. Run your game. Today's episode is also brought to you by the pre-alcohol probiotic drink from Zbiotics. The pre-alcohol probiotic drink by Zbiotics is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in your gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make Zbiotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. I've used the pre-alcohol drink from Zbiotics. It absolutely works. So make sure that you follow these steps. Step 1, drink pre-alcohol. Step 2, drink responsibly. Step 3, enjoy tomorrow. Go to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use code LockedOnNFL at checkout. Zbiotics is back with a 100% money-back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember, head to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the code LockedOnNFL at checkout for 15% off. All right, Luke, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL. We talked about the New York Jets news crashing out once again, but no surprise there with the ownership issue that they are dealing with. But now I want to turn our attention to the favorites in each
some teams that matter. Yeah, some teams that are worth your
time. Teams that we should care about. So I know that the Buffalo Bills beat the Kansas City Chiefs this weekend. I know. I'm aware. I saw the game. But I think it's fair to say that the Kansas City Chiefs are still the favorites in the AFC. The question becomes, if you
I'm there with you.
All right, well, perfect then. If you had to bank on a team knocking off the Kansas City Chiefs, the Buffalo Bills, the Baltimore Ravens, the Pittsburgh Steelers, who might it be? Before you answer, Luke, though, my guy Joe Marino from Locked On Bills feels pretty confident about where the Bills are headed now after this victory.
Bills 30, Kansas City 21. Heck of a way for the Buffalo Bills to enter their bye week at 9-2 and riding a 6-game win streak. Excited for what this team's going to look like coming out of the bye after they have the opportunity to not only get healthy, but to really assess the operation and advance it. Thinking about these weapons on offense, Kincaid and Coleman to go with Cooper and Shakir and Samuel's coming along, and Mac Hollins is an X factor, and the running backs are all doing a nice job, and the offensive line will get Spencer Brown back. I'm very excited about what this offense is going to be over the final 6 games, and surely the big play defense will continue to gel, and maybe that Matt Milano dude will come back real soon as well. So just feels like there's a lot of great momentum for this football team.
I totally agree with Joe. I do. They have great momentum. I think this might be the best Josh Allen team that we've seen if they're able to stay healthy on defense. I think Amari Cooper's only going to get healthy and get more ingratiated into the team. Keon Coleman is a rookie who I think is obviously going to improve in the back half of the season compared to the first half of the season. They'll get Dalton Kincaid back healthy, hopefully here soon. So I do like Buffalo, but I got to tell you, Luke, I think more than Buffalo, more than Baltimore, I think the Pittsburgh Steelers are the team that I would ride with. I am now a believer. That defense, I think, is the biggest factor. They're the best defense out of the 3 teams that we're talking about here. I think with the deep ball from Russell Wilson, it gives them the opportunity to hit some big plays, which can change the game. I think I'm going to go with that Pittsburgh Steelers magic. And if the Steelers happen to get the number 1 seed for some reason, and you got to go through Pittsburgh, I don't know. If I had to rank them, I'd go Pittsburgh, Buffalo, Baltimore last. I don't believe in the Ravens this year. I don't think they have it. So what say you about those options in the AFC?
Boy, Pittsburgh is such a tough one to nail down, but they have sort of demanded your respect, right?
Yes,
like they've done enough where like you can no longer afford to look past them and say, oh, it's just Russell Wilson and look at how bad he was in Denver. This is a different formula, right? And it's very classic Steelers, right? Like that Steelers-Ravens game was so very classic, knock them down, drag them out, 6 field goals. Let's play this like it's the 80s, out in the cold and all that. And yeah, like, here's the deal. Pittsburgh now has a full-on like 2-game lead in the division. They're 8-2. Baltimore is 7-4. And now Pittsburgh has that tiebreaker. Cincinnati and Cleveland don't exist. So it's somebody's got to go through Pittsburgh. Might even be Baltimore themselves. So it's really hard to believe in Baltimore I'll go with inconsistency out of Lamar Jackson. I think the MVP chant is warranted, but not every week. And you can't be a week-to-week proposition and then go win 4 in a row in the playoffs. If that's what you got to do to go win the Super Bowl, especially if you're going on the road. Their pass defense has been porous at times. They've been kind of diced up. So as hard as the Steelers are for me to pin down, it still does feel like this is coming down to Kansas City, Buffalo. Now Buffalo's got the tiebreaker, and that gives them a great chance to be at home whenever that meeting happens. But
does that matter though? It's never mattered before. Does that even matter?
Oh, sure it does. Of course it does. Of course it matters. It's always a tight game. It's always tough, but that home field advantage is always a thing. I mean, both places are outdoor stadiums, so it's not like you're, bringing Miami to, like that's a different thing, or, Los Angeles having to go outside when they're a dome team, like that's different. But that, for whatever that's worth, that's part of it. And the Bills offense is its 2022 form. Like we all kind of missed it because of how funny they were last year with like Sean McDermott going all 9/11 truther on you. But I still believe the Bills are the first. And so if the answer is what's the second best team in the AFC, to me, it's the Chiefs.
Because you think that Buffalo is actually the favorite now in the AFC.
Is first, and I would call Pittsburgh a dark horse that could maybe steal one off of either of those teams and really wreck this. But it does feel like we are careening toward another major Kansas City, Buffalo AFC championship game, or maybe a divisional game if the seeding works out that way. That it turns out to kind of be like the moment that the AFC is decided.
Yeah, I would say that's fair, but I would just caution that we've seen the Chiefs not play their best in the regular season before, and then who ends up on top once again? The Chiefs. So from my perspective, there's no way that I would call anybody else the favorite. There is basically nothing that can happen that would make me say that the Chiefs are not the favorite to make it out of the AFC. Like, I just don't care about what happens in the regular season with the Chiefs.
I mean, and the Bills have beaten the Chiefs in the regular season like 3 years in a row now.
3 years in a row. Yep.
But I'll put it this way. The Chiefs can win that game, absolutely. They're going to have to. Somebody has to beat the Bills, and it probably has to be the Chiefs. And I don't know if they're going to be favored in that game.
Well, I just hope that they give me Patrick Mahomes in points in a playoff game, because that is
they might
a recipe for happiness, in my opinion.
I think they did in the past.
The NFC, also very, very fun conversation. The Detroit Lions are clearly the best team in the conference right now, but the Eagles, maybe Luke's team, the Minnesota Vikings, fresh off being handed a win against the Titans, could they possibly take down the Lions? We're going to discuss that. It's Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Hillsdale College. Time is our most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses, including Constitution 101, the meaning and history of the Constitution, Introduction to Free Market Economics, The Great American Story, A Land of Hope. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced so that you can start whenever. You can tune in wherever. Plus, you can always go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. All right, Luke, we're going to cap off today's edition of Locked On NFL. We talked about the Jets news, talked about who we trust in the AFC. Now we're going to move over to the NFC before we dive in. Thanks again for making Locked On NFL your first listen. Make sure you get subscribed, stay subscribed for free year-round NFL content on all platforms. Also, check out the afternoon edition of Locked On NFL with Tony Wiggins, the barber himself, in the barbershop. Some great stuff going on over there as well. But, Luke, like I said, the Detroit Lions, fresh off another 50 bomb, put it on the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Sandblasting.
52-6.
How do you not
ridiculous.
fire everyone after that? I'm sorry, I can't. The Jags are not worth my time. They're not worth my time. They're not worth my time.
After reporting on Sunday that they were going to fire everybody, and then it literally went worse than you could ever even imagine, and yet they're still not fired. So anyways, the Jaguars are a disaster. That's how you lose to the Lions worse than the Titans lost to the Lions. I will always laugh at the Jaguars' pain, no matter how down bad the Tennessee Titans are. But going back to teams that matter, the Philadelphia Eagles got a huge win over the Commanders. Big time win. The Minnesota Vikings continue to roll at 8-2. If one of those teams had to knock off the Detroit Lions, or you had to bet on one of those teams to actually make it back to the Super Bowl, who would it be? And before you answer, my guys at Locked On Eagles seem pretty confident in their squad.
Sole possession of first place in the NFC East. They are the 2 seed right now in the entire NFC and one of, if not the hottest teams in football, Gino. And I know you look at Sunday and the Lions won again, but I think you're starting to see the NFL right now like as close as it's ever been as a league. But at the same time, you are starting to see like who the great teams are, like the true contenders are emerging. The Lions, of course, have been that team. The same with the Chiefs. I think you're starting to see that with like the Buffalo Bills. I think Thursday night showed the Philadelphia Eagles are in that category for sure. There's only probably like 4 or 5 teams I'd put there right now, but I think the Eagles showed on Thursday. They're kind of showing greatness, and I don't think even in a close league, everybody's doing that are playoff contenders.
Luke, we've talked about it throughout the year. Run game and defense has made a comeback.
Mm-hmm.
And the Eagles can run the football, and their defense is playing lights out. With that in mind, I will say, screw your Vikings. I'm taking the Eagles. No, I'm not still mad about Sunday's game. Nope, that can't be the reason at all why I'm saying this. But all
line up on the line of scrimmage probably is maybe my advice.
What a ridiculous call over and over and over again. But anyway,
it's been all year with it. I mean, the Vikings have gotten eaten by it too.
It was the first week of the season when they called it a million times on the Chiefs, and then it basically has been ignored until.
You want a problem with it? Look at Laramie Tunsil and the Texans. Oh my God, he gets like 2 of them a week. It's horrible. They cannot figure it out. It's a different.
Such
thing.
A subjective call. The NFL is just out of line. But anyways.
Apparently so is Isaiah Prince.
Yeah. I trust the Eagles run game more than I trust the Vikings run game. That's what it comes down to for me. And the Eagles have more playmakers, in my opinion, although the Vikings have a lot of playmakers too, no doubt about it. But I trust the Eagles defense. I trust the Eagles run game, and I like the Eagles playmakers better in a big spot. So with that being said, I will take the Eagles over the Vikings if somebody knocks off the Detroit Lions.
Depends on what you prioritize. I think if you want to talk about the passing game, the weapons, you take Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, you put it up against A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith, Hawkinson and Goddard and all this, and it has been almost exactly even to this point in the year. Been very, very similar passing offenses. Both teams have had their kind of dips with their passing offenses, but have been mostly very efficient. Run game wise, the Eagles might be the best rushing team in the league. Vikings have been, we'll go with average generously at that. Mm-hmm. But defensively, the Vikings, at least statistically, are head and shoulders above the rest of the league. They have done some absolutely unholy things. Even against bad offenses, those bad offenses are having their worst games of the year. Colts, Jags, both had their worst games of the year against the Vikings. And they've found ways to slow down offenses like the Packers, the 49ers, the Texans, and handed those teams all their worst games of the year too. So it depends. I think the question is you give the Vikings defense, you give the Eagles run game. What matters a little bit more? And I'm gonna have to I'm gonna have to go with defense because that's a whole side of the ball versus half a side of the ball when it comes to run game. But ultimately, I think like the Lions are going to have to beat both of these teams, probably at home, to make it to the Super Bowl. And it's a question of which one of those is going to be able to do it. The Vikings will be playing them for a third time, and it's hard to beat somebody 3 times in a row. And maybe even, third time. The week 18 is Vikings Lions. So that was like a very recent one to deal with. And the Eagles are going to have to kind of get out of their own way in the playoffs as well, which they couldn't do last year. And they collapsed around this time last year. So I think there's still plenty of questions about the Vikings too. You can listen to Locked On Vikings for that. But it's really hard. I'm going to be a homer. I'm going to go with the Vikings, but I'm not going to do it with like the utmost confidence.
That's fair. I would say also one thing that we haven't mentioned here is the quarterback position. And I'm taking Jalen Hurts over Sam Darnold in the playoffs. Someone who's actually done it, who's made a Super Bowl run.
Playoff experience is big. Yes.
Yeah.
For sure. So and most of this Vikings team has had one playoff game.
Yeah, exactly. So I understand that it's close. It's not a slam dunk by any means, but I would definitely roll with the Eagles. I will ask you this before we head out of here. Aaron Rodgers, Minnesota Vikings starting quarterback?
No. Okay, the reason people are saying this is because of the Favre thing. It's stupid. Aaron Rodgers, he needs to flitter off into the sunset. But if he does decide to come back, so here's the deal. I can tell you this with confidence, okay? We can. The JJ McCarthy is the quarterback for 2025. Everybody wants to find a way for it not to be. What if it's Darnold? What if it's someone else? Ooh, what if he got an injection in his knee and then that suddenly that didn't affect the timeline at all? He's going to be fully healthy and ready to go before the draft. Like that's still the expectation.
I have a question that has nothing to do with this wacky injury update, which I agree with you on. It's not a big deal, but
no, it was sensationalized by people that don't have your best interests at heart. I'll put it that way.
The whole reason that they brought in Sam Darnold is because they didn't think that JJ McCarthy would be ready to go.
Yeah, it was a bridge
right away. Why is that any different in 2025 when JJ McCarthy didn't get any game experience? How has that changed at all?
Great question. They got him in the building.
Only kind I have, Luke. The only kind I have.
No, it's a totally valid thing. And the answer to it is that Kevin O'Connell got him in the building, worked with him all of training camp up to that first preseason game before he got hurt. And I think just working with him for a couple of months was enough to sell O'Connell 100% he's going. Like that was all he didn't need to see on-field performance like we as fans need to see on-field performance. He worked with this kid. He's no longer theoretical. He's no longer a draft prospect. He's a person in front of you that you're working with. And that sold Kevin O'Connell on it. Kevin O'Connell is now going to tie his entire tenure as a Vikings head coach to this kid. He's going to do it. He's already decided that he's going to do it. For better or worse, the decision is made.
I think you could still do that and have Aaron Rodgers in the building in 2025. I don't want
Aaron Rodgers anywhere near my building. Did you just see what he did to the Jets? Oh my, get him out of here, dude. Yeah, no way. Go away.
Have culture. You know what I mean? Like, but it would be different. It would be different.
Bringing the guy that ruins culture? Absolutely not.
Was better on the Vikings.
Freaking way. I've had enough Rasputins. Okay. No.
All right. Well, with that being said, we'll let Luke off the hot seat and quit filling his head with nightmares. But with that being said, thank you so much for tuning in to the Locked On NFL podcast. Going to be back tomorrow with Michelle Majuk, the data queen herself. For me, the madman, Tyler Rowland, and my co-host, Luke Braun, the brain. That's going to do it for us today. Thanks for tuning in to Locked On NFL. Get subscribed, stay subscribed. And as I tell you every episode, stay safe out there.